Just ahead, there's another edition of the Florida Roundtable, a service of Florida's talk and entertainment networks, and in the Orlando area of Tough TV 38. I'm Reagan Smith, Public Affairs Director of the Florida News Network.
I'm political commentator Al Spry. Je suis Charlie.
Yes, sir. I'm with you. Je suis Charlie. We'll have some thoughts on that, and later on in the hour, we will be joined by former Congressman Dr. Dave Weldon from the Florida Space Coast. He's got many views and some predictions on what he sees coming in the Congress. So, if you'll stay put, the Florida Roundtable begins following these messages. This is the Florida Roundtable, a service of Florida's talk and entertainment networks, and in the Orlando area of Tough TV 38. I'm Reagan Smith, Public Affairs Director of the Florida News Network.
And I'm political analyst and commentator Al Spry. It's great to be here with you, Reagan, as always. Great to be on Tough TV 38, which you can pick up over the air, and it's free. Also, you can get it through certain cable companies as well. If you want to get it through your cable company, call them and say, I'd like my Tough TV. We're on 3 times a week. Wednesdays, Saturdays, and Sundays at 9 a.m.
Yeah.
So we'll start off with the Charlie Hebdo attacks in Paris. This seems to be a turning point, I think, I think people have been lulled into a state of complacency regarding the actions of Muslim extremists, and that I don't know what's going to happen, but Europe is completely up in arms about it. This was 2 gunmen raided a cartoonist's office, and they killed cartoonists who offended them. And more than 3 million people, almost 4 million people, marched through France in anti-terrorism rallies this past week. Officials say the outpouring was the largest gathering in the country's history, but guess who wasn't there? Any high-ranking U.S. officials. None were there.
And that is a disgrace. Absolute disgrace.
It is. I'm very surprised at it. But, of course, this lends credence to people's accusations that, Muslims can do no wrong to our president. Maybe that's what it is. Or am I being a little bit over the top with that statement? I don't know. It seems to be proven out.
Yes, and we got 2 years to go, and we'll find out more. But think back a couple seasons back, Al, we had my dear friend Dana Summers here in the studio with us. That's his life, making fun, satirical, editorial cartoons.
Right.
You want to shoot him? I don't want to shoot him.
Well, no, but then again, I'm not a Muslim guy. I don't. Maybe these guys are thinking differently, huh? They're very offended.
They want to go into that country and bring their laws with them, and it doesn't work that way.
Now, don't get me wrong. I know there's 1.5 billion Muslims, and maybe 100 million of those, or 150 million, are supportive of these actions. Let's just use that number because that's based on various polls and so forth and research that's been done over the years. That's still a lot of people, Reagan.
It is.
And, I think that far be it from me to tell the Islamists and Muslim folks what to do, but I think the Muslims need to evolve. I think they need to have the same discussion that Jewish people had years ago and Christian people had millennia ago, and that is, do you keep on the path of extremism, or do you get on the path of tolerance?
Well, and if you choose to live in a country that is a democracy, you made that choice. You came there, and you need to know that you should abide by their democratic philosophy and their way of life and their laws.
Well, yeah, obviously you need to do that, and this is more than just an attack on the cartoonists. There was a jogger was attacked. Several police people. They went to a Jewish supermarket, and 4 Jewish people were left dead. And then you have, of course, Hamas, who is condemning the attack, but didn't condemn the part about the Jewish people dying. That's okay, to them. Yeah. So I don't know. I think we have to know our enemy and not try to pretend he's a nice person, and try to pretend that, well, if we just leave them alone, they'll just be nice. I just don't think that's a good idea.
Well, and the fact is, if you leave them alone, they won't be nice.
Right. And there was and here's something else that just happened. A newspaper was firebombed in Germany, the Hamburger Morgenpost, which had reprinted the Charlie Hebdo cartoons. Yeah. So this is an attack on free speech among all free people, and it must be answered.
Absolutely. I'm with you 100%. Well, it is that went quick. Time for us to take a pause along the network line here. We'll remind folks that this is the Florida Roundtable, a service of Florida's Talk and Entertainment Networks, and in the Orlando area, we're seen on Tough TV 38. I'm Reagan Smith.
I'm Al Spry.
And in just a couple of moments, we're going to be joined by former Congressman Dr. Dave Weldon from Florida Space Coast. We'll continue in a moment. We're back. You're listening to the Florida Roundtable, a service of Florida's Talk and Entertainment Networks, and in the Orlando area on Tough TV 38. I'm Reagan Smith.
And I'm Al Spry.
And Al, as promised, we are off to Brevard County, South Brevard, actually, where we are joined by Congressman Dr. Dave Weldon. It has been quite a while since you were with us, Congressman, and welcome back to the Florida Roundtable. It's so nice to have you here again.
Oh, it's great to be on with you, Reagan and Al. And, I'm actually former Congressman Dave Weldon, Dr. Weldon. And that's the main reason I haven't been on the show with you for a while. 14 years in the House, and I'm done. So, but I still keep a finger in politics a little bit. So.
Well, you ran for Senate about, 3 years ago?
Yes, I did. I lost in the primary to Connie Mack, who then went on to lose to Bill Nelson. And so I haven't completely gotten politics out of my blood, though, after losing in that primary. Sometimes I say it's time to hang up the spurs and go back to being a doctor and a college professor. So,
Sure. Well, you had a nice long run in the Congress. I want to throw this at you. What do you think of today's Congress versus when you were in there? What changes have you seen? What can we look forward to?
Well, some things change and some things stay the same. Of course, you have the influence of the Tea Party now. Back then they called us not Tea Party, that's a new term, but I forget what they called us, the majority makers, I think. But just the rambunctious guys and gals who go up there saying we're not going to do business as usual, and they want to make a change. And there's a lot of pressure for that. I mean, the American people really want to see action out of their elected officials at every level of government, but particularly Washington. There's disappointment with gridlock.
Do you think that the reason why there haven't been many laws passed with this Congress over the last 6 or 8 years is because I guess conservatives don't really like passing new laws? Is that part of it? Because it seems like nothing is happening, and maybe people like it that way because more laws means more restrictions usually. That was one theory that I had heard from several people, and I wanted to ask you about it.
Well, let me just key in on the last part of what you said. Some people like it that way. That is true. You'll meet a lot of people. They like divided government. This way, bad laws can't be enacted, like Obamacare, for example. Mm-hmm. Obama came in just as I was leaving, but he actually got elected to the Senate 4 years before I left. So I had a little exposure to him. He is very left-wing. He talks nice. He sounds nice. He's got a soothing voice, but he's very, very liberal. And I talked to many of my friends in the Senate, and that's the way they described him when he was a senator. Nice guy, but very, very liberal. So you got this very, very liberal president, and in 2010, the House flipped back Republican, mostly conservative, and it's hard there's not much of a middle for these guys to meet on. Now, that's some of the pressure they're under now, is can Boehner and the Republicans in the House and McConnell in the Senate come to enough middle ground and actually get some things done with a very left-wing president like Barack Obama? And I don't know. It's going to be tough.
Well, you say he's left wing, but Wall Street loved him. They probably still do. So how do you juxtapose that, or is it the Wall Street left because he's a big money guy? So in that respect, he's not really that left wing.
Fascinating question.
Yeah.
How did he raise all that money in Wall Street? And I have to tell you the facts. A lot of people on Wall Street are very liberal.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of them are Jewish, for example, and they're mostly Democrats. Chuck Schumer is another great example. He raises a lot of money from the Wall Street community, and many of them are Democrats and quite liberal in their philosophical outlook. The Republican base is the small business base, the vast small mom and pop operations all over the country. So the left is always trying to label us as big business. We're not big business, the Republicans. We're small and medium business. Big business is the Democrats, and that shows up, like you alluded to, in their donations. Mm-hmm. And so that's just the way it is. I wasn't surprised at all. Hillary will raise more money. She's probably going to be the Democratic nominee in New York City, in Wall Street, than will whoever our nominee is. But
But how do you juxtapose that with the different regulations that have been passed? Because those were passed with the Democratic Congress, and a lot of them were not exactly friendly to Wall Street. So how does that work?
I know. It amazes me. It amazes me. The banking bill,
right,
what you're really thinking about, the Dodd-Frank.
Yeah.
It's been very bad for the investor community, but yet they support, people like Dodd and Frank and Obama who signed the bill. And to me, it's a great irony, and I don't have a really good explanation.
Are they just turncoats, or are they just nuts, or what? I mean, what?
Well,
I mean, how do you get all that money and then pass, like you said, the Dodd-Frank and all that stuff? It doesn't make a lot of sense.
No, it doesn't. Listen, I sat on the banking committee. I used to go up to New York City. I used to meet with a lot of these people. I founded the Israel Allies Caucus in the House, and I used to go up there to New York a lot and meet with a lot of the pro-Israel people, and a lot of them were people that I got to know through the banking committee, and many of them are Democrats. Now not all of them. There are a lot of conservatives in the investor community. They're not all liberal, but a lot of them are. And I would marvel at it. How can you support this party that vilifies you on a regular basis and describes what you do as evil and frequently wants to regulate you out of business? And I don't, frankly, have a good explanation for it other than, people make their party affiliation decisions based on a lot of other issues. A lot of them like the Democratic Party positions on social issues like gay rights, for example. Mm-hmm. And so that, for some of them that trumps economics. I don't know.
Speaking of gay rights, of course, we have gay marriage in Florida, what they call marriage equality, where people are using different words. What's your take on this interesting and development? Because I didn't think I'd see this happening, of course, in our lifetime per se. It's an interesting phenomenon, to say the least.
Well, I personally think it's a bigger issue than the gay issue, and it has to do with the courts. We passed a referendum in the state of Florida defining marriage as between a man and a woman, and then we had that bill that we passed in the House, and the courts, liberal judges, mostly federal judges, but some state judges, are just banging their gavel and saying unconstitutional. And this is not just the gay issue, but that's the way the gay marriage thing is going. The courts are ushering it in, and the courts have done this with a multitude of issues over the years. You'll pass a tax cap, for example, in a state, limiting taxes, and then some judge will say unconstitutional. And it's something that Jefferson talked about over 200 years ago, and he worried about, and he wrote about it, that of the three branches, the one that he thought was the most dangerous were the courts. And I can tell you today, and every American needs to understand this, You could pass any law you want. You could pass any ballot referendum you want. But the way this country is going, the judges can nullify your vote and nullify your opinions. They can redraw congressional districts. They can redraw state house districts. I mean, and I don't know where it's ultimately going to end in our republic if we're actually going to truly have representative democracy anymore, or if we're just going to have rule by the judges. But that's how this gay thing is being ushered in Florida and all over the country. The courts. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, that's all right. I was going to say, in the early part of the 20th century, what you put your finger on here is something that Teddy Roosevelt campaigned very hard for more than once, and was never able to really get anything with it, where he wanted to be able to recall judges. If you didn't like a decision and it was very unpopular, that the populace could remove a judge.
Well, Teddy, I grew up in Oyster Bay, and Teddy Roosevelt was one of my heroes when I was a kid growing up. And I read some of his books and biographies, and it was one of the things that motivated me to get into politics. Now, I'm out of politics now, but if I were to get back into politics, and if I were to run for president, I would probably make this one of my highest priorities, because to me, it's a huge issue, and it's not just the gay issue. If you actually look at what's going on a whole host of issues, the courts are just sucking up more and more power. And honestly, not a lot of people are talking about this, and I consider it to be a very, very worrisome and bothersome thing that every American, liberal and conservative, should be concerned about. And Republican and Democrat, black and white, young and old, we have this system and this balance of powers and the separation of powers, but the courts are just stepping in and taking over more. And this goes all the way back to, I'm trying to remember the name of the case. I'm not a lawyer, I'm a doctor, but it was a Supreme Court case, and the Supreme Court, way back in the early 1800s, declared a law that the Congress had passed unconstitutional, and that the Congress never took that power back from the court, and it's just existed for years, but it was exercised in a limited degree. But if you look back historically, the courts, particularly in the last 30 years, are getting more and more aggressive in doing this, and it's a danger.
I think though I have to disagree with you in some respects. I think you're thinking about the early John Marshall Court probably, but I think that there are cases where you need judicial stepping in because of the balance of powers, because the legislature tries to take too much power, or the executive branch tries to take too much power, because the courts have made some good decisions. Like we could say the decision to desegregate certain schools in the '60s.
Brown versus Board of Education.
There's a good example. I mean, so I can't always say to the contrary. Reagan?
All right, it's time for us to take a little bit of a pause along the network line. I was just going to point out that the last federal judge actually removed from office was a man born and raised in Altamont Springs, a guy by the name of Alcee Hastings, who, after he got thrown off the federal bench, went back to South Florida and got himself elected to Congress, where he still serves to this very day. We can come back to that. This is the Florida Roundtable. I'm Reagan Smith.
And I'm Al Spry.
Our very special guest is former Congressman Dr. Dave Weldon. We'll continue in a moment. From Pensacola to Key West and all points in between, you're listening to the Florida Roundtable, a service of Florida's Talk and Entertainment Networks, and in the Orlando area on Tough TV 38. I'm Reagan Smith.
And I'm Al Spry.
Our special guest this day is former Congressman Dr. Dave Weldon. He spent 14 years in the House of Representatives, was a Republican candidate for Senate a couple of years back, lost that primary to Connie Mack, who went on to lose to Senator Bill Nelson. But Dr. Weldon, it's a pleasure to have you with us, and it's been way too long. We wanted to talk a little bit about, have you look into your crystal ball there, a little bit of a notion or your ideas The Republicans now officially control both houses of the Congress. We still have a Democrat president. What do you think the Republicans should be doing with their newfound power?
Well, I think they were already getting off to a good start with the Keystone Pipeline now. I don't think they have enough votes to override a veto. But, the job situation I still think stinks. I mean, people are working more, but if you actually look at the numbers, they're being paid less, they're working part-time, and then they're working these 30-hour weeks. They also did a very good thing. They passed that bill in the first week, changing the 30-hour requirement in Obamacare to 40 hours. So because there were all these companies that didn't want to give people 40 hours, and so people were working multiple part-time jobs because of the mandate, the health insurance mandate. Now, whether Obama will sign that, I don't know. Whether that can get through the Senate, I don't know. But they're getting off to a good start. My priority, if I was up there, would be to try to, we were talking in the first segment about things like separation of powers. I think one of the greatest concerns that I have had, and I'm talking about not just for the next 2 years and really not for the next 4 years, but the future of our republic, is the incredible amount of damage that has been done to our constitutional system and our separation of powers by Mr. Obama. And I'm specifically thinking about his decrees or decisions. I mentioned Obamacare. He delayed implementation of several features of the bill. He had no legislative authority to do that. He delayed some of the requirements for the unions. He had no legislative authority to do that. But the big thing, of course, is what he's done in immigration. He essentially put about 10 million illegal immigrants on the path to citizenship with no implementing legislation. These people will essentially be illegal immigrants as he makes them legal because he has no law to do it. And so his unconstitutional exercise of presidential authority is unprecedented. It's got huge potential implications for the future of our country. I was talking about the courts earlier. If you get another president in place and you don't rein this stuff in and you don't address this, the next president could do more of the same sort of thing, like the environmental stuff. He wants to implement carbon decreasing mandates on businesses and industry. He has no legislative authority to do that. He essentially wants to do that through presidential fiat. So if I was up there, if I were John Boehner, I would be looking at what can we do to try to rein in this president, this imperial president, and reinvigorate the legislative process. Now, of course, that's going to be challenging because he's going to have to work with the Senate. And, we only have, I think, 55 votes in the Senate, so getting anything through, you're going to need Democrat support. But that's, to me, for the future of our nation and the future of our republic, that needs to be addressed.
It's funny, you read my mind. I was thinking imperial president. There was a book that was written in the mid-2000s about George W. Bush called The Imperial President. So I think we're seeing a trend for the last 15 years.
I think it goes farther back,
and even
that.
further back.
Richard Nixon was referred to as an imperial president.
I think we're just trying to see a power grab by all three branches, which is, I guess, the way it is, right? Is that human nature? We're just going to keep seeing these power grabs by Congress, the president, and the courts. I think this is the trend now, and maybe it's the trend of human history. But that's why I guess that's why the founders put in checks and balances. Those are supposed to take care of these usurpations.
Yeah, I think if you read the Federalist Papers, they talked about it a lot, and it's obviously the whole reasoning behind the three branches and the separation, and what you have with Barack Obama and what Reagan said is true. Ever since, some people would say World War II, some people would say World War I, some people would say it goes all the way back to the Civil War, that there's been an encroachment of the executive branch on legislative authority. It's accelerated dramatically under Barack Obama. And if I were Boehner, And I would be thinking about what is my legacy, what do I want to do. I would be saying we need to try to address this. There's a couple of easy bites of the apple, and one of them is this immigration issue. And the only way I know of that you can really get at him is probably through the appropriations process. Other words, we're not going to give you the money to do this. We still have the power of the purse. You can't write a check. We write the checks. And it's the one power that they still hold on to. And that's what I would be looking at. And I was on the Appropriations Committee, and that's the way I think. But
do you think? But think about this. Do you think it gives Boehner an out having the president do this on immigration? Because Boehner was going to work out an immigration deal, and plus, you remember, we have a growing Hispanic community in this nation. We're going to have 1/3 of the Americans are going to be Hispanic origin in just a few short years. Do you think that that's why this is being allowed? Because Hispanics, that's an important vote, and if you go against immigration, it doesn't look like you're a big tent party, so to speak. So do you think it lets Boehner off the hook? That's probably why you won't see action.
It might. I can't get in his head. I worked with him for many years, but I'm not there anymore, and I don't know what he's thinking. I don't know what he's saying at meetings. I can only speculate. I do know this. The Democrats really want to make all these people citizens because 90% of them are going to vote Democrat, and it's got the potential to flip Texas Democrat. It's got the potential to flip Arizona Democrat. So this is a very, very high priority for them, and a lot of it has to do with votes and who's going to control the Congress for the next 30 years. But the bigger issues, we're letting in 1 million legal aliens a year right now. This is far in excess of what we ever allowed into this country during the big immigration years around the turn of the last century when people were coming through Ellis Island. I think the peak number was something like 300,000 a year. 1 million legals, and then we have all these illegals. So we need reform. I would agree with Boehner. We need reform. We need to do something. And to a certain degree, I'm sympathetic to what Obama did before the election with the children. I think that's just a common sense issue. Somebody's brought over here when they're 2 years old. Frequently, they don't even speak the original language. We don't necessarily want to send them back, but whatever we do on this issue, if it's very liberal and we make it very easy for people to get citizenship, you're just going to invite more and more illegal immigration. I mean, this problem is never going to go away. So I'm opposed to amnesty, basically.
What do you think of what happened with Boehner and you had Daniel Webster, who got quite a few votes to become Speaker, which we didn't expect. We've had Dan on the show here a couple times. What did you think about the little mutiny there?
Well, I wasn't surprised to see it. Boehner has not always stood with the conservatives, and I was a little surprised to see Dan do that, particularly because he was on the Rules Committee, and it pretty much guaranteed that he was going to get kicked off of Rules, because the Rules Committee, they're all appointed by the Speaker, and so I was a little surprised to see that. Some of the people who voted for him, like my congressman, the guy who replaced me, Bill Posey, I wasn't really that surprised to see Bill vote for Dan because, Bill helped make Dan Speaker of the House when they were in the Florida House together, and Bill Posey's really good friends with Dan Webster. Nugent, I think, was similar. I think he was in the House with Webster. He was a big Webster fan. I thought it was kind of healthy. It sort of sent Boehner a message. You don't want to get too out of step with the conservative movement.
We'll have to stop right there.
Yeah, it's time for us to take another pause along the network line here. Let us remind you that you are listening to the Florida Roundtable, the service of Florida's Talk and Entertainment Networks, the Orlando area of Tough TV 38. I'm Reagan Smith.
And I'm Al Spry.
Our very special guest this day is former Congressman Dr. Dave Weldon from the Brevard County, the Space Coast area. Stay put. Our conversation continues following these messages. You're listening to the Florida Roundtable, a service of Florida's Talk and Entertainment Networks in the Orlando area on Tough TV 38. I'm Reagan Smith.
I'm Al Spry.
Our very special guest this day is former Congressman Dr. Dave Weldon. I have alluded to the fact that Dr. Weldon spent 14 years in the Congress representing a district that includes Florida's Space Coast, and we need to take a minute or two and chat about what is going on there. We're still with no capsule of our own for ferrying astronauts around, but as you watch, and you were obviously very intimately involved in the space program, how do you assess what's going on in our space program today?
Well, the big problem, you just put your finger on it. We have the space station up there, but the only way we can get our astronauts up to space is on Russian rockets, which is a disgrace. Particularly in light of what's going on in Crimea and our relations with the Russians deteriorating. It's a dangerous situation, in my opinion. But fortunately, things seem to be moving ahead. NASA is trying to address the issue. The Congress appropriated some more money. We have a rocket and a capsule that we're developing. I would say the most exciting thing is we're talking about commercializing crew transport. They've got contracts out with Elon Musk, his SpaceX company. They make the Falcon rocket. And I think it is Boeing has the other competing contract for a commercial crew, they call it, which is a real change. You know, all of our previous, the shuttle and the Mercury, Gemini, Apollo were wholly owned government operations, but now we're talking about letting commercial companies ferry our astronauts to space, which I think is probably good. I think it's time for that.
All right. Before we have to go, it is hard to believe, virtually 10 years since Jeb Bush was in office and dealing with a case, and here's a name from the past for you, Terry Schiavo. I just did some extensive reading on the Bush involvement in that, and now Mr. Bush exploring the possibility of running for president. Your thoughts?
Yeah, I've already seen comments about it in the media, and I suspect it will come up as more of a point of discussion and could actually, if Bush runs, come up in some of the debates. He, of course, took the position I did that she should not have been declared brain dead, and that she did smile and she did seem to respond, and the family didn't want it done. And of course, I introduced the legislation in the House, which passed the House but became a fiasco in the Senate. So I suspect this issue will come up, and his position is the same position as mine, that he believes in God. He believes that human life is sacred. He's pro-life. I'm pro-life, and you don't just casually starve a human being to death without a flat EEG, in my opinion. And she never had that, so it'll probably come up.
In a broader sense, and I wonder, the former governor was up here many times over the years. This particular case shows what I would consider to be a unique tenacity in his philosophy. How many times he lost in court. It went through the Florida legislature, went to the federal government. He didn't give up. I mean, it just, we got about an extra 5 years out of it, I think.
Well, that's a quality of character that I like. We talked about Teddy Roosevelt earlier in the program. He had a stick-to-itiveness. He's a man of principle and character, and I actually like Jeb, and I would like to see Jeb run, and I think he could become a great president. Personally, we're going to have to get over a lot of issues like 3 Bushes, for example.
Yeah, that's my issue. Is do we really need these dynastic familial power centers?
Well, it's going to be one dynasty versus the other. Clinton versus.
Could we get rid of both Clintons and Bushes? Could we just do that? Because that's what I always tell Reagan. Could we just get rid? Let's talk briefly before you have to go. I know we're running out of time, but let's talk about the Charlie Hebdo attacks in Europe. Is reaching a zenith here.
Well, yeah, it's. To me, there's a whole bunch of things about that are so tragic. They were following those guys, and they stopped following them 6 months before they did it. And, the French are now probably going to overreact and pump more and more money into surveillance. But it's a real international problem. It's not just a problem for the United States. And free speech is important. It's one of those God-given abilities that we all have, is to speak freely from our mind, and there are people who don't want you to have that power and that ability, and it was very, very sad to see this played out. Now, the French have a problem in that, we have 3 million Muslims in the United States. They have, I don't know what it is, 20 million or something.
It's a large no. It's the largest number in any European country.
Yeah,
and here's the thing. I think ultimately the Muslims have to weed out the extremists. And if they don't, they need to have a discussion within their own religion. What way they're going to go. Are they going to go the extremist route? Or are they going to go the moderate route, which is what other major religions have done? All religions have had to do that. And I think unless they do that, we're going to be in serious trouble.
Yeah, they have the same problem in that if moderate Muslims get up and really take on the extremists will kill them. And actually that's one of the things they're known for, is not just killing Jews and Christians, but they kill Muslims who oppose their extremist.
We have to stop right there.
Yeah, unfortunately, Congressman, the clock has caught us. But let us invite you back to do this again a couple of months down the road and get an update. Congressman Dave Weldon, Dr. Dave Weldon, thank you so much for being with us. This is the Florida Roundtable, a service of Florida's Talk and Entertainment Networks and in the Orlando area of Tough TV 38. I'm Reagan Smith.
I'm Al Spry.
And good to have Dave Weldon back with us again. And as he said himself, the ability to speak a little bit more freely than when he was actually still sitting in the Congress. But we'll have him back.
Reagan, I have important news. Rubio has written a book.
Hold the no, don't hold the presses. We can't. They won't print it.
How predictable that a politician who's thinking about a run for a big office has written a book.
Yeah.
When he was thinking about running for Senate, he wrote that other book that he wrote about Florida, 100 Good Ideas. We had him on the show back then.
Yep.
He doesn't come on the show anymore for some reason. He's too big now.
I guess.
But I will say this. It's pretty predictable when all these guys write books. I find it kind of boring. But he's doing the tour. Went on CBS this morning. It's called American Dreams, of course. It's got that great title that makes your heart fill with pride about being an American and having a dream and all that stuff. But anyway, and don't get me wrong. I like the American Dream. I think it's a great idea. I just wish the politicians would stop passing laws that take the American dream away from the middle class and create this just poverty-laden, government-assisted community where we're not the home of the free and brave anymore. We're just a bunch of sad people, seems like nowadays.
We'll put you down as neutral on that.
Winner and loser of the week on politics. The winner, Daniel Webster, who we've had on the show a few times. He has big cojones, Dan Webster. Went against John Boehner for the House speakership. Lost, and now he's lost his post on the House Rules Committee, along with his friend Representative Rich Nugent, who was also removed from the House Rules Committee. But he's still a winner for having the gumption to stand up. I didn't expect that of Dan, so it kind of surprised me.
And he is still going to be there in the House, so
Sure.
He's got a fairly safe seat.
Loser of the week, Ted Yoho, who looked like a clown in offering himself up against Boehner. He just yelled, "Yoho!" loudly, voting for himself for Speaker and drawing laughs from fellow Republicans.
All right.
So there you go.
Well,
it's the right way to do it and the wrong way to do
there
it.
you go, yeah. Scheduled to be with us next week is Dr. Matthew Corrigan. He is the author of Conservative Hurricane, a unique look at Jeb Bush's years as governor. This is not a song of praise nor a song of criticism, an analysis by a professional political scientist who is the chair of the political science department at the University of North Florida. And I think you're going to find his commentary very interesting. I'm Reagan Smith.
I'm Al Spry.
We'll see you next week with another edition of the Florida Roundtable.
You've been listening to Florida Roundtable, a weekly look at issues and problems of concern to Floridians from a state, national, and international perspective. Presented by the Florida News Network with your hosts, Reagan Smith and Al Spry. The views and opinions expressed during the preceding program are solely those of the participants and not necessarily those of this station's ownership, management, or sponsors of FNN. Your views and opinions are welcome. Address your card or letter to Florida Roundtable in care of Reagan Smith, 2500 Maitland Center Parkway, Suite 407, Maitland, Florida, 32751. Or you may email reagansmith@fnnonline.com. Thank you for listening, and please join us again next week for another edition of Florida Roundtable.